Welcome to Goldfish on Games, where it's high noon in deep space, and mankind is under attack from the Xenome forces, and there's only one person that can save us. So let's find out how that happened in the Gunman Chronicles, which was developed by Rewolf Software, with Sierra Online publishing it in 2000 for Windows. If the box art feels familiar, then you might not be shocked to hear that this is using the Half-Life engine. And in Europe at least, they used a very similar box art for the game. The US got this more distinctive design, with a gatefold that looks really cool and gave far more info on the game. Inside we find a single CD in a jewel case, with the cover doubling as a mini manual. That contains the CD key and some system requirements, but that's it. To really find out about the game, you're going to have to check out the bigger manual. That goes into far more detail, including some background to the world and what's about to go down, as well as looking at all the weapons in the game, which is very useful as the weapons are far more involved than most of the FPSs at the time. And on the back of it, well, it's advertising the never released Dreamcast version of Half-Life. And amazingly, they continue to do that in the brochure that was also in the box. But there's also some really good titles there that did manage to come out. Starting the game, we get a quick video intro that lays down the events that will have repercussions for our lead. And then it's on to the main menu, that for anyone that's used the one version of Half-Life will be very familiar with. And, well, there's not much in the way of options. There's some typical resolution changes and key bindings, but there's not much in the way of graphics options. It's pretty much like the original Half-Life in this sense. So let's get into the game proper.
Good morning, Major Archer. The following news highlights have been custom filtered for your special interest as a courtesy of Hypercast Networks. For further information on any topic,
that leads us into, well, a classic Half-Life trope, as we have a tram ride, in which the computer gives us some lovely world building, all while interesting things happen outside the window. But all you really need to know is that mankind is at war with the Xenomes, an alien race that are attacking at random and ravaging planets, and we are part of the Gunman forces. That's meant to be fighting back, but things aren't going all that well. And a few years ago, we were involved in a failed mission that resulted in the loss of a great general, which was what we got to see in that intro video. After getting a brief sense of freedom, we get locked into another room.
Attention, men! I have the pleasure of introducing you to this man.
To get the briefing on the mission we're about to go on. But before we can do that, we have to complete the tutorial, as there isn't an optional hazard course. The one thing I would have liked them to have taken from Half-Life.
You have to duck to get under this, sir. Excellent. Watch it. Jump over this.
This target requires 400 damage points to score.
Because there's no way of skipping it. But at least some of it is integrated quite nicely into the game. So after learning how to duck and jump and use a few of the guns, where does a space western game send us first? If you guessed a planet with temples and dinosaurs, then I'd say you've played this one before, as there's no way you could have guessed that. We are here to investigate an odd signal. And while there's whole squads of gunmen around, who gets to head off and do a nice little explore on their own, with just a knife, in an area full of dinosaurs? That's right. But it doesn't take too long to find the source of everything, at which point everything explodes. It's gonna be one of those days. And while you run around trying to work out who's doing this and why it's happening, you get treated to a bunch of scripted sequences. They really did have a lot of fun with the Half-Life engine. And wait, what's that tank doing? No. Now if the other forces trying to kill you isn't bad enough, the smaller raptors decide it's dinner time, and you are on the menu. And they like to pop out of these small holes to try and get around you. Clever girls. Oh, and because this is ancient temple ruins, we obviously have to deal with blow darts that have unlimited ammo. Things start to become a little bit clearer as the mastermind behind all of this is revealed. And it's the General. The one that everyone thought had died, didn't.
5 years. You might recall a little scene that unfolded on Banjo Prime? Scene of a crime, I should say. You weren't even a major then. You had no authority to order the retreat. Not while your general was still alive.
And it seems being left for dead in the belly of a creature that couldn't digest him pissed him off slightly. Whoopsie. Oh well, live and learn. We can all put this behind us, right?
Science team, they too saw the light of my vision, and they have labored well to engineer a host of new xenome species.
Oh, he wants revenge on the gunman and all of humanity. He might have gone a little bit all evil villain on us. But he does let us go, if just because he wants a giant dinosaur to eat us instead. Which sets off another series of cool set pieces as we try and work our way off the planet. Now eventually we find a ship that's just waiting for some extra cargo, to go along with the little dinos that they've already captured, because they want to use those to try and bolster up their Xeno forces. But what is that extra cargo? It just happens to be us. And this triggers quite a long cutscene, all of which is done in-engine, which I'm a big fan of. Leading us on to Part 3, the Barren Moon. That is being used as a testing ground for some new Xenomes, who are fighting against the local AI drones as well as some random enemy troops, giving us another Half-Life flashback with the military fighting against the creatures from Zen. And obviously, they will all attack you on sight, so you better keep your wits about you. This is where the baddie selection starts to get interesting, as there's various robot types with their own different attacks, like these beam ones which are really quite deadly. But you also get a number of different Xenomes. There's these basic beak biters, as they call them, that do this really weird jump attack, but there's also these flower looking ones that will fire homing bees at you, which will even drop a bunch of them when taken out. And all the while your arsenal of weapons will increase. But we'll get into those in more detail later on. The other main character in the game also shows up here, the mainframe AI.
At first I trusted you, but it was you who brought the Xenomes here.
And why not? This moon is
Who is a little bit mad, in all senses of the word, as it seems being left to run this moon for decades on its own has left it a little bit odd. It also doesn't like its moon being used as a test ground either, and having all of its drones attacked.
to your drones. They will kill you.
And my drones will kill you.
And she really doesn't like the fact that we've become an agent of destruction. But we have no real plan, so we end up just taking out anything that moves and blowing up anything that doesn't. But there are a few enemies that will prove a little bit more resilient to our attacks, like this flying drone that has this really nice shield effect if you try to take it on. And to be honest, you can't really blame them for trying to stop you. Between taking out multiple power generators and making the space anchors not, it's making the moon a little bit unstable in its current orbit. And it really does feel like you want to try and destroy the entire place. I'm not entirely sure why you want to do this, and neither is the AI, who really does try to kill you directly and indirectly, which I feel is quite fair, really. But with there being lots of health stations, ammo lockers and all sorts around you, you're never too far away from topping up everything anyway. Well, apart from the armour, those vests are pretty few and far between. And you will want that armour, as you have another enemy that you have to run away from, the giant war drone, that's protecting the shield tower, which seems to be our destination, because if it's doing a very good job of stopping asteroids from hitting the moon, then obviously we have to go turn it off.
Do not interfere with my drones. They must keep this tower operational.
Which really gets the AI very angry, ending in the only way this was ever going to. You falling into a pit. But after a 3-hour enforced power nap, you're all better again and you're ready to continue being a menace. It seems being on a moon that's slowly crashing down towards a planet with no shielding isn't going all that well, as there's now lava that you have to deal with, as well as some form of queen that will keep spawning more xenomes. And after a bunch of caves and pipes and then finding your way back into the base, the mainframe realizes that you're still alive.
I cannot believe you survived. How unfortunate. No matter. You won't survive long in the meteor storm.
And it doesn't pretend to even offer cake, just death by meteor, which it fails to deliver on. How typical for an AI to promise something and then not give it to you. As what you do get is a series of corridors and battles that for the most part you just blindly follow, as nothing has really changed, at least in regards to any plan. You'd assume he'd want to try and get off the planet, but if he has any idea of how to do that, it's not being shared. Being the old silent protagonist and all, it's just really fighting onwards. But the developers must have realised that this wasn't enough, and what was missing was some boss fights, as so far the larger enemies that we've seen we've had to avoid. And first up, we finally get to take down that flying drone. And this isn't done by getting some new weapon, instead you have to press a series of buttons that will fire this large beam weapon or something or other, and if you get the timing just right, it will hit that annoying flying machine, as it will also be attacking you through its various flybys. So it does become quite satisfying when it finally crashes into the wall, and just so happens to open up a corridor that you need to go down. The next boss fight isn't too long after the last. This time it's this huge creature that will just keep grabbing these bee-spawning creatures to annoy you. Taking it down is mostly a case of attacking it with everything you have, and then at some point it'll just get a bit fed up of all of this and then just leg it over the wall. While our hero continues his path of destruction, I think it might be interesting to talk about the team and how this game came about. As initially it was a multiplayer Quake mod called Gunman 101, that later got moved to the Quake 2 engine and then finally to Gold Source, and along the way the team got inspired to make some single player content. Something that the Gold Source engine is particularly good at. And then during a Half-Life Mod Expo, this came to the attention of Sierra Online, and resulted in the team getting a contract to finish and release the game. And what makes this even more interesting is that the company Red Wolf was really formed around this single title, and the team was made up of various modders from around the world, and they all worked remotely. Something that a few of us have gotten the chance to experience recently. The downside to this was that when the game was finished, the company wrapped up and closed down, which looks like it might have left the rights to the game in limbo. Between you, the Xenomes and the enemy scientists, the AI really isn't having a very good day, and decides, we really have a lot in common, you and I. Chiefly being, 1, wanting to get off this crashing moon, and 2, taking out the General. So you decide to work together. Or at least she decides to do that, and we just follow along.
I have a plan that could save both of us. I propose a truce. My aerial defense drone will meet us at the surface. I will order my drones to cease hostilities, and you will be able to take my mainframe core with you to the surface.
Which is cool, as it means one less group trying to kill us. The downside is, well, we need to fight deep into the base to collect the AI, who thankfully comes in this handy, luggable form that you can plug into wall sockets to open up a few doors. And with your powers combined, we finally have a goal, and the ability to achieve said goal. And with someone even giving you some basic objectives as well. The first one being, get off this planet. And to do that, we need to get to one of the larger flying drones.
Ability of successfully navigating the... Engines offline. Navigation offline.
And surprise surprise, it does get damaged on the escape, but it does manage to limp through the space portal and arrive at the General's planet.
Gunman, prepare for impact. If backup power holds, we have a chance of surviving this.
And any landing you can walk away from is a good one, but at least we are near the home base of the General. And it's finally giving us that space western vibe with the level design. This is the final chapter of the game, and there is still quite a lot to talk about, and I think it might be time to have a look at the weapons. As you might have noticed, they don't always do the same thing, because almost every gun in the game has a few modes. Now there isn't an upgrade station or using any experience points, you can just right click to bring up the gun menu, which is different for every single weapon. Like the pistol, that can switch between a few different modes, including rapid fire, charged, or if you find the upgrade, the sniper pistol. As there are a few upgrades that you can find around the levels. The shotgun can use more or less shells, and you can also change the shot pattern, and the machine gun is either a single shot or fully automatic, with a heat mechanic on how long you can fire it in automatic mode. The grenades, which are really just rocket launcher ammo, can be switched between being cluster, or explode on impact, or even be timed, so they are quite useful. There's also more weapons that you'll pick up as we go through this level, which includes their version of the rocket launcher, the Mule, that we'll thankfully get while we're trying to navigate a rock face and can be used to take down a helicopter, and that's because it's got a few different modes such as homing missiles, you can use it to lay down traps, it's got a cluster mode as well, it is very useful. But one of the more interesting guns is one that we've got previously but we won't see again till the very end of the game. That is the Polaris Blade, that can either fire a beam, it's got a chain attack, or even a BFG styled ball, and you can set the range and power of each of those, with accuracy taking a hit with the more power that you provide. It's really cool that there's all these customizations that you can do, but it felt like I stuck to a few of those modes, and rarely used some of the others. Now it might just be the case that everyone will have their own favourite, which would be nice as it makes it feel more unique to you, or it might be that some of the modes are just better and everyone tends to stick to the same thing. I'm not entirely sure there. Now there is one more gun that we'll find as we go through this chapter, but we'll cover that when we finally get to it, as there's still quite a lot to this game for us to play, including a very western style set of houses, and having either these turrets that fire constantly, or an APC that likes to block your path and fire constantly. which highlights one of the issues I have with this game, the audio balance. As you have this constant and loud machine gun sound going on, and then you've got the AI trying to talk to you at the same time, which then coupled with the lack of subtitles and any other environment sounds that are happening to go on, makes it really difficult to make out what's being said. Typically it's not all that important, it might just be giving you a small hint of what's coming up. It's no GLaDOS, but it can be a little bit annoying at times. The APC when you come up against it is a fun little puzzle, as you can't take it out directly, but instead you have to drop a big rock on it. Big rocks solve most problems. And what big rocks won't solve, a tank will. Not that you get to drive it straight away. First of all, we need to fill it with fuel. I think Duke Nukem Forever might have been cribbing from this game. And don't think you can just ignore it and just try and head off into the level, as there's these turrets that have been set up that will absolutely annihilate you if you try to make your own move. So topping up the fuel and then using its weapons to take out those turrets or just ignore them, you'll be able to move on through the game. Not that you'll get very far at first, as wouldn't you believe it, there's something blocking the path, and we have to get out and do some button pressing to try and move forward. I'm not sure OSHA would approve of the location of some of these controls. But I don't think a mad general who's experimented with aliens and dinosaurs is really paying that much attention to on-work accidents. And after travelling around a few more canyons, and with dealing with more of those turrets, we get blocked again, but this time by a bridge.
The drawbridge has been lowered.
Seeing that our tank has travelled a good, at least mile or two at most, it runs out of fuel again and you need to find more. And it's also a double whammy as there's this pile of rocks that you need to break to get the tank past. And that obviously will involve shooting a tree to make a makeshift bridge. When it comes to trying to get this game and play it these days, well, there's some mixed news, as the rights to the game are a little bit messed up, as Rewolf Software, as we previously mentioned, didn't last long after the game was published. And Sierra, well, they've been sold on as well, so it's anyone's guess who now has the license. So I don't think there's any chance of seeing it come online on a digital store anytime soon, but I'd love for that to change. So if you did manage to track down a copy of the game, what's it like running it now? Well, you can just run the original CD version even on modern systems. It can get a bit wonky with resolutions as it tries to switch quite a few times between the intro animations, the menu and the game, but it will work, and you might want to enable windowed mode to make it a little bit smoother. There is also a fan patch that will let you update it to use the Steam version of Half-Life. I've not tried it, but I hear it can be quite useful. But there's also another solution, and that is running it via Xash 3D. This is the open source engine remake of Gold Source, which is the official name of the Half-Life engine. Now this allows for a few cool things like widescreen resolutions, full screen, and a whole bunch of very nice things for running it on modern systems. But I did find that it had issues with the HUD. It doesn't quite show up right. And it also won't play the intro animations. But if those issues don't bother you, then this is a pretty good way to experience the game. And after a few more canyons and shooting up some houses, which explode very nicely, the tank will run out of fuel for the last time, and it just gets dumped here. Now I do have to ask, what was the plan for that tank? Like, there's not really anywhere for it to go. And it just feels like the baddies didn't really need it. They just got this tank and just left it in a shed somewhere, because what else are you going to do with it?
Massive energy flows below ground. I suspect that there is a facility buried beneath the surface.
But never mind, because this will lead us into a trap, as the General is really pissed that we're still alive and will try to blow us up with explosives.
I've underestimated you, Archer. But you have underestimated my explosives.
Shame it's just a simple padlock holding us in this room. This leads us onto the underground base, where we finally get to meet the Alpha species. You know, just because you called yourself an Alpha doesn't make you one. And can you guess what our task is going to be? Yes, that's right. We're going to try and get that thing loose so it can mess the place up. But that will require us messing around with a bunch of lifts, and then plugging our old friend AI into the master computer and take it over. While we're down here, we also get a new weapon, and one that we can combine 3 different liquids to produce different results. So you can tweak it to be better against flesh, metal, or just explode. It's cool if a little fiddly to use in combat, so you have to set it up beforehand. The AI also gets a new body, and will berate you anytime it has to wait for you.
Get out of my way. It seems I will have to save you one more time, Gunman.
Which might happen during this part because it is a bit of a maze, and you'll end up coming back and forth through the same areas quite a few times, so it is quite easy to get confused. But after you finally release the Alpha species, it does exactly what you expect. Rampage! And there's lots of fun moments with it breaking through walls to attack enemies, or just trying to make things a little bit harder for ourselves. And I swear when we get to see it again, it looks a lot larger now than when we got to see it in that cage. Surprisingly, there's still quite a bit of this game to go. You have to deal with these frozen areas with ice physics, to having to swim around for a bit. And it's all eventually leading up to a final boss fight, that initially has you attacking in a tank, where you have to try and play peekaboo with the General, as he has this warp cannon that can send us into another dimension. But once you finally take that out, you'll then have to just protect the AI, who's now in this giant mech, from Xenomes, as it gets to attack the General directly. Which makes it feel a bit like we're doing the busy work, while someone else has all the fun. And there we have it, a forgotten game from an unknown worldwide team that I think should have got far more credit than it does, as they did quite a few cool things before anyone else did. And I had a lot of fun with it, even with a few of the issues that I mentioned, so hopefully you'll go out and try and track down a copy to give it a go. Now I have joked a little bit about how linear the game is, but I do enjoy a good linear shooter, and this is a great example. so you should check it out if you have the opportunity. And until next time, I've been the Goldfish, that was
Major Archer, Major Archer, Major Archer.
and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching me talk about this fun game. I hope that if you got this far, you enjoyed it. And you might even consider hitting some of those buttons below, as they will protect us from the Xenomes. They'll also let YouTube know that you'd like to see more. Or you could modify their interest into checking out some of the other videos that I've done, as you'll find 2 links on screen right now.